Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello again to another episode of Railway Conversations with Doc Frank. I am Doc Frank, the host of this podcast, and my guest today is Lisa Hogben from Melbourne in Australia. Lisa has until very recently worked on a major project in Melbourne, the Melbourne Airport Rail, which has been put on hold, and as a consequence, Lisa is now out of a job trying to find a new one. We still had a quite inspiring and upbeat conversation about topics as different as the effects of a sudden unexpected job loss because the project ends, the building of a project team culture, handling of minorities, the Women in Construction initiative in Australia, and resilience. I hope you find this conversation as interesting and inspiring as I found it. Please enjoy. Hi, it's Doc Frank here. Real quick, I want to let you know about one of the best CBTC trainings in the world, if not the very best, but you always need to be careful with superlatives. It's the CBTC Kickstarter online course. It consists of 30 video lessons, that's the 3 with the 0, in total over 11 hours of training content, talking about everything from the basics of CBTC, current standards, the benefits of CBTC, the key functionality of it, the supply industry, application tips and tricks, lessons learned, do's and don'ts, case studies, arguably the most comprehensive training that you can find anywhere on the topic of CBTC. A few additional things that make learning easier for you that you may not find on any other online courses. One of them being an immersion plan that helps guiding you through the training course and progress it in a finite period of time instead of just having it sit there for months and months on end. There is access to an online study group where you can connect with other students who are doing that training course at the time and form learning groups. There will be live coaching calls once every 2 weeks. And after the training, you will not be on your own. There is an alumni community that allows you to ask questions about the course content on an ongoing basis. So it's basically education for life. You can inform yourself about this training course and register to it on my training portal, which is docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC Kickstarter -online 2023. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC Kickstarter -online 2023. I look forward to seeing you at that training. And until then, please enjoy my upcoming episode of this podcast. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to have another female guest. It has been a while. I was trying to keep this halfway balanced, but it's not that easy. And I'm very glad that you were happy to join me as a guest. Even though your personal circumstances right now are less than perfect, to say the least, you've come over to Australia to work on a big project here in Melbourne, the Melbourne Airport Rail. But because of a recent decision by the government to stop or to pause the funding, I think your activity has quite suddenly ended there. How do you feel personally?
Yeah, I'm calling myself a director at large at the moment. So look, I feel disappointed, obviously, for the kind of the project to come to a pause. We'd built an amazing team and we were doing some great work. But I also feel really, personally, I'm quite a positive person, so and a bit of an adventurer and a free-spirited type. So I genuinely believe that, when one door closes, another door opens, and that all things do need to come to an end. Usually nicer when they come to an end because you built the thing. A little bit sadder when they come to an end for other reasons. But I've met some amazing people, done some really, really great stuff, learned a lot, and I'm really grateful for that. I got to work for 2.25 years on the project, so I feel like I had a good innings.
Yeah, and just working over 2 years on a project still reads kind of okay in the CV. I mean, given you've come over for this project from the UK, obviously there are two seemingly obvious avenues now. Either you can decide to go back to the UK, or you can decide to stay here and find a new job. And I think if my knowledge about visa is right, you've got about 2 months or so to do that. Can you say what your preference is, or are you still making up your mind? Where do you stand at the moment with your positive attitude, which is certainly helpful?
It's a funny one. I think when I first moved here, I thought, I'm just going to do 2 years and then I'm going to move back to the UK. And then you get to Australia and you're like, it is quite nice here, and the weather's better, and much more outdoorsy lifestyle, much more relaxed, and I thought, okay, well, maybe we'll do 3 years and then we'll go back, and then the time just keeps on kind of going by, and you think, it's quite a nice place to live. So we at the moment want to stay in Australia for at least a little while longer, but then at the same time, I am a absolute city kid. I love London. I always loved London. It's one of the best cities in the world to me, and so I love my life there too, and I left it pretty much as it was, and so that's why I think I can feel quite positive at this time, and that there's no downside for me, like whether I get to stay in this amazing country for longer or whether I get to go back to the amazing country that I'm from. Then either one of those options is a great option, and I'm really, really lucky and privileged to have either. So my plan will be to remain here for a bit longer, but time will tell.
Yeah, well, it's definitely good to have options which seem attractive, not just, well, I can't find anything better, so I have grudgingly go back or something like that. And it's certainly a test for flexibility. I think especially in these times where job security, if there ever was a thing like this, is even more shaky and fragile than it used to be. I think everybody is probably well advised to at least have some thought experiment. What could happen if I lost my job in a month or something like that? That's not to say that people should permanently look for other opportunities, but I've found it quite striking, and I've seen it several times, that people lost seemingly safe jobs, and then all of a sudden they started panicking. What do I do now? And as it turned out, they had completely neglected their networking in the industry. They had like a LinkedIn profile with 15 contacts or something like this, where you look at this and said, how long have you been in the industry? Like 2 months or 25 years? Yeah. And so it's probably like a bit of keeping your powder dry, so that if happens. I mean, you could probably call up somebody in London and would have a new job next week or something like that. And so I mean, things like this, which really give you like a parachute in case you need one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an existential crisis, isn't it? That job loss that's somewhat unexpected, is that it reminds you how close you are to not being able to pay your rent, doesn't it? And in my case, how close you are to deportation. And actually, sometimes I think, these things, if you can kind of come out the other side of it to somewhere positive, they can be a really important reminder of our privilege, of the things we are lucky enough to have and the things that we take for granted. So yeah, I think as well, and you all know, because were you from Germany? Did you say?
Yes.
So I think whenever you move to a new country, you kind of realize how much you can take, how resilient we are, how much change we can introduce to our lives and be absolutely okay and sometimes thrive, and so it's kind of made me a lot more. I was pretty adventurous before. I was always like a see what happens kind of person. But this has made me even more aware of what we're capable of and how much change we can accept and embrace. So no option here is a bad one. I'm really grateful for what I've been able to do here. I hope it continues. But if it doesn't, I've got an amazing life waiting for me back home as well, and some amazing colleagues and contacts and companies and people I want to work for and people I want to work with. So let's see which one wins, Melbourne or London.
Yeah. And I mean, these contacts that you've gained here over the last 2 years, that's something that's not going to be taken away from you. So that's something that you will definitely keep. And you never know. I mean, there's this saying in this industry, you always meet twice, which is probably an understatement. And you never know how previous contacts may pan out to your advantage in the future. I got aware that you lost that job on the project by you posting on LinkedIn and talking enthusiastically about the spirit of the project team, obviously before the whole thing got put on hold. And it seemed to me that this team spirit, team culture thing is very special to you. It's very close to your heart, and I was just assuming you're probably pretty good at that, like building a culture like that. Can you talk a little bit about this? So basically, when you started coming over here, working on the project in a quite senior, responsible position, what you did and what your experience was in building this culture, bringing the team together and forming something with probably close bonds between the team members?
Yeah, so definitely something that's really close to my heart and a huge part of what I believe in, I suppose, and what I believe leaders should be focused on. So, and maybe partly driven by, I'm mixed race. I came from a relatively kind of low socioeconomic background. My partner speaks in their second language. I'm a migrant. I'm a woman in a predominantly male industry, and I'm a non-engineer surrounded by usually engineers. And so I think I have quite a lot of lived experience of being quite different, and other in a sort of a world of majority. And so it's always been something that's kind of personally resonated with me. Like, how do you make people feel safe, psychologically, physically? How do you make them feel important and valued and recognized? And how do you look at skills and capability beyond the norm of what a place may have always looked at it? And so when we had an amazing opportunity with Melbourne Airport Rail, because it was brand new and it had nobody to start with, which means you don't have to have any of the excuses that our industry loves to have. Railway the world over, 16% women forever. It never gets better. Oh, well, there's no women coming through the right, degree courses. Oh, well, we just can't keep them in the industry, or they don't have the right skills, or blah, 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 blah. No excuses. You're starting from nothing. You don't have to inherit any of this sort of KPIs of any teams that have come before you. So we set out with some tough targets. So we kind of, instead of a business target that might tell you need to aim for 30% women, for example, we went for 50-50 from the get-go. If you go for 30%, you tend to get 25 or 20. If you go for 50, you might get 40, you might get 45. You're really starting to do more than you must is a huge thing of mine. And I do think in construction and rail, we take a target and we go, tick. All right, next challenge. And I think that's a big part of where we go wrong. And then the other thing for me is just I am incredibly people focused. I love people. That's what I love about my job the most. I don't care what we build. I couldn't care less whether it was an airport station or a shed in the back garden. I'm not an engineer. I'm not driven by the beauty of the bridge or any of that. I am absolutely fascinated by people and people interactions and teams and people problems and why they happen and how we fix them and how you create like the best environment for everyone to be their absolute whole self and achieve their potential. And that's what makes me feel good at the end of the day, and that is what makes them feel good at the end of the day. So I was super proud. I am super proud. I will always be super proud of the amazing team that I built, that we built as a project. They will all now be my friends, my future colleagues, and I'm super excited to see what they'll all go off and achieve. I'm sure there's a few CEOs in there in the future. So yeah, something I'm really proud of.
Great. I mean, that was certainly a bit of an unexpected statement. Like, I don't really care what I'm building as long as I can work with other people.
Bad project manager.
Haven't heard that before, but yeah, maybe some people or more people than I could imagine think at least that way. Especially if you are a project manager and basically say, well, as long as it's a project, I can manage it. Yeah.
Maybe they don't, maybe there aren't that many people that think that way. I mean, I am quite weird for construction and rail in many ways. And I think everybody's driven by different things. But one thing I would say I have found with many of the engineers that I've met, there's a type of brain that's amazing at figuring out how something works, how to put it together, like wanting to transform something from an idea or a picture into a reality. Well, my brain's not really like that. Mine is that kind of the people focused, emotionally intelligent kind of interactions brain that is really interested in the way that everybody behaves to get to the thing that you're trying to build. So, and I think that the blend of all those different types of brains is where you're looking at that diversity of thought then, aren't you? But yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'm an absolute anomaly in that, or maybe there's a few more of me out there who've never admitted that.
The other thing you said, which I found very interesting and intriguing actually, was that you said you want to create an environment where people feel safe. And I could imagine, after what you just said about you being the odd one out in a number of aspects, if you create an environment where you can feel safe, arguably it should be even easier for everybody else around you to feel safe as well, because chances are they are not as much the odd one out as you think you are yourself. So is that kind of the driving force there?
Yeah, I think having some lived experience of ways that you're different in certain environments, and that spans across gender and race and all sorts of things. It could be disability. It could be like something that some part of your upbringing. It could be moving to a new country. Any moment where you walk into a new environment and you go, don't feel quite like I belong here. If we think really consciously in those moments of what it feels like and why we feel uncomfortable and what's making us feel nervous and which parts of our personality we hold back in those environments because we're not completely sure it's going to be okay. Those are those moments where we realize the biases that we apply to other people who don't represent something that it matches our life, our experience, our competence, our CV. So that's definitely the beginning of it. But then I think it has to kind of transcend beyond that, doesn't it? So you start off and you go, okay, well, I kind of get it because, I experienced racism a lot through my life and from a very young age, or I experience how it feels to be a migrant moving to a new country, but not at anywhere near the extent of how it might feel for a migrant in their second language, or the third language, or an asylum seeker or a refugee, or a person like a Muslim woman in construction, or a Black woman with disabilities in construction, or a man speaking in his third language. And when you start to kind of really apply all those things that manifest as barriers to people, that just the human being in me could just go, shit, like, how do I now, as a leader, create this space where you get to be exactly who you are, like all parts of your personality are okay here.
Hello, this is Doc Frank again from the studio. Just a second. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the interview with Lisa, and I'm pretty certain you will enjoy the second part as well, which comes in a moment. For now, I would just like to ask you if you like this podcast and if you already liked some of the other episodes that are worth checking out, then please subscribe and tell your friends about it, because this podcast is only as much worth as the number of people listening to it. It's meant for the entire rubber industry, and there are still a few people out there who have not even heard about it and who will probably be grateful to you if you point them towards it. Thanks very much, and now please enjoy the second part of the interview with Lisa.
Lisa, you said that you are not an engineer by education, but according to your profile, you seem to have a role in women in construction. Tell me about this, what this is and what you're doing there, and what the effects are of these organizations.
Yeah, so I'm an elected board director with the National Association of Women in Construction. So that's the peak body in Australia for over 25 years, supporting women's kind of participation and representation and fulfillment in the construction industry. I'm also the chair of the NAWIC Diversity and Inclusion Portfolio, which I launched with a committee of 12 sort of earlier in the year. I joined NAWIC not long after I moved to Australia, because I've kind of felt a bit of difference between the UK and Australia in terms of kind of the conversation and progress around sort of women's participation and diversity, inclusion, equity, culture, that type of thing. So I wanted to try to do my bit to make things a little better. And so through NAWIC, I get to do loads of cool stuff. So I get to try and partner with amazing other organisations doing great things in this space. So whether that be sort of working with Tech Diversity or Women of Colour Australia, or partnering with big organisations running great campaigns like Rent a Kill Initial, who are doing an amazing washroom dignity campaign to try to lobby employers to provide free period products to staff. It's events, it's awards, it's all sorts of networking, connection, and meeting and greeting amazing women and sort of male allies in the industry.
Sounds like a lot of additional work. I mean, I don't want to just pick on the potential negatives, but it sounds like in parallel to a full-time job that you had on the project, that seems to be quite a bit. Yeah. Still some time left for private things, or did it completely eat you up? I mean, it sounded like you were in that with a lot of passion and with a lot of enthusiasm. So and quite voluntary as well. So
yeah, I really believe that, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, if you are any kind of minority in a leadership position, I think it's our responsibility to represent. I want there to be space for other women, other people of colour, other non-engineers, whatever minority you want to be, to reach their full potential in the construction industry. And I really, really want to do my bit to kind of to help create that space and help remove the barriers that stop us from succeeding. So I'm super happy to do it. I love NAWIC. I love all of the amazing people I get to meet and the things I get to do. It's incredibly linked and aligned to my day job, if you look at it like that. So some of the most wonderful people that I've met in Australia, I've met through NARIC related things. And when you network with people with whom you share a belief system or principles and values, what you tend to find is that those connections run really, really deep, and those relationships become really, really strong, really fast. And so that's also got benefits to our day jobs. So yeah, it's been a really positive experience for me, and it makes me feel like I'm doing more than I must, which is a kind of a motto of mine, I suppose, for all of us.
Yeah, and it's giving back to the industry, or to a minority group, and hopefully making it a bit easier for others to thrive in a similar way. I mean, you seem to have yourself quite well together with regards to your minority status, so you seem to be comfortable despite of that. And this is something that's certainly to be wished for everybody else feeling to be in a minority. But I understood your previous point, that as a leader you need to create an environment that really gives that, and such an environment starts with the awareness that somebody else may feel themselves in an awkward situation. You mentioned migrants where English is not the first language, which I experienced myself. Yeah, so I came here to Australia, migrated, started a new job. Everybody expected me to hit the ground running, even though I just left my home country. I was in a completely new culture with a new employer, talking all day in a language which is not my native one. And I can't really recall it, that people ask a lot, like how I manage, how I keep afloat, whether I've got difficulties with that, and I mean I manage, but easy is different, you know. And so it's this kind of leadership with the awareness, like what specific situations may certain team members have. That's certainly something that's not, it's not natural. It doesn't happen all the time. It really requires some specific conscious effort of the leader. Sorry, you were saying something, and I just kept finishing.
I was going to say as well, like for me, my heritage, my differences or whatever, I'm proud of them. You know, I am proud of where I come from. I'm proud that my mum is black, my dad is white. You know, I'm proud that I'm of the studies I undertook, that, you know, even if they're not necessarily the same kinds of ones of lots of the people around me. And I think it's trying to find a way to celebrate our differences rather than you know, try to succeed in spite of them. And so I think leaders, we like anyone that is a line manager, and I use the word leader really loosely, like anyone can lead from anywhere. You just need to have kind of passion, determination, you know, make an effort, and we can all do something every single day. But people who have teams or even one direct report, we have a huge influence on a person, on their life, on their happiness, their morale, their success, whatever that looks like to them. And I actually think that we forget sometimes in rail and construction how much power we do have to make meaningful change, and how much more we should be doing with that. So, you know, I hired a fabulous team, and in a lot of instances, I probably didn't make the decision that somebody else would make. And so I'd probably say as well that underpinning a good team culture, you know, an inclusive environment, an ability that everybody gets to be themselves and have a good time, has to be a contract of employment and performance management as well. You have to hold up like an incredibly high standard, a high expectation, and then you create an amazing environment above that point. If you fail to deal with poor behavior, for example, or poor performance, then that erodes your culture and your inclusive environment as well. It builds resentment. It chips away at a good team. So it's the combination, I think, of like, you have to be a hard ass in your profession and your expectations, and then kind and empathetic and inclusive as a leader of that team after that point.
I think you just dropped a real gem there. And in case somebody listening has missed that, I would like to re-emphasize that, because you said it's very important that you basically accept your own position, including being part of a minority. And I can confirm this happened to me over time as well after I came here. So initially, I didn't really want anything to notice that I'm German, even though my accent is so bloody obvious that I couldn't really hide it, but I was trying to. And it was only over time that I realized that a lot of people here in Australia have very high regards to German cars and generally anything to do with engineering and coming from Germany. So I thought, you know what? As an engineer working in an engineering space and coming from Germany, maybe that's not the worst of things. Maybe that's actually a sign of quality, or a potential indication of quality. And I think I've seen similar things when I was in contact with women in engineering, which is probably a kind of similar thing to what you do with women in construction. The strongest women in the room were the ones accepting their position and saying, yes, I'm a woman in a male-dominated domain, which is engineering, but as a woman, I can bring characteristics and certain skills and strengths to the table where actually men are handicapped because they are just thinking in a different way. So instead of hiding away and saying, oh, I'm the small women in a men-dominated world, everybody is mean to me and so on, they said, hey, I'm a woman, I've got certain strengths, and I, in certain regards, I can run circuits around you. So accept that and accept the contribution that I can make that may be better in some regards than anything that you can ever make. And this kind of self-acceptance was really like a success secret, and hopefully that's a takeaway for some of the listeners who may find themselves in a similar situation, that that conscious acceptance as the peculiarities as strengths may be a very good thing to assume.
Yeah, and I always think it's funny with the kind of gender equity thing around, like, to me, whether you're a man or a woman or anything in between, you are all just as likely to be good, bad, amazing, horrendous. We all have the responsibility to go into a role and try to do well, show our competence, treat people with respect, etc. And I think somewhere along the line in industries that are dominated one way or the other, it turns into this kind of narrative, like, let's say women in construction or women in leadership in construction are somehow more likely to fail, more of a risk, more of an experiment. We're not. We are just as likely to do well as the next man in leadership, or just as likely to do terribly as the next man in leadership, just as likely to be mediocre. We are multifaceted beings. I think the thing is just that there aren't that many of us there now. And so it's still a thing of kind of, we're not completely sure about that, or how is this going to go? And so often the conversation goes into like toughness or resilience or, being able to cope. Most of the women that I know, especially those in construction, are the most resilient people you will ever come across. And resilience gets so often misdefined in our industry. It's kind of come to be seen as this thing like you don't react to anything. You don't feel feelings. You show absolutely no, agitation or anything to stresses. That's not what resilience is. Resilience is about how quickly we spring back into shape after something happens. What we need in leadership is vulnerability, is empathy, is relatability. People resonate with that because we are all human beings and we all go through shit in our lives, and we need to know that the person that you report to is a human and not a robot. And so I actually think women grow up being encouraged to express our feelings and our emotions. It's not a bad thing for us to do when we're little Men often, stereotypically, get taught the opposite. They get taught they have to keep a stiff upper lip and hold in their feelings and look after their, their sisters and their mothers, and kind of make it seem that they're not bothered by things. And I think that's a big part of what women can bring, that men aren't always so good at, is that emotional intelligence and empathy and leadership. And I would really, really love to see the construction industry move more towards that.
With respect to your time, we need to wrap up in a second, but I don't want to wrap up without asking you what I had in mind for a while. How important, in your view, is humor or a sense of humor for the workplace, especially in a project environment, construction environment, which very often tends to be seen as a cutthroat, very hard, very tough environment?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm English, so I'm absolutely sarcastic. Like, we're basically born sarcastic, and having fun, ranting about your day when it's shit. Being in the pub for after work drinks with your colleagues, all those things are really, really important to me. Laughing relaxes people, it boosts morale, it makes people feel connected, and you often see people's senses of humour come out when they feel more relaxed and they feel comfortable, and it can be often a sign of a good culture or a good team environment. You have created an environment that allows them to feel like they can crack a joke and that it's going to be okay and that people are going to laugh. So yeah, I'm a big fan, and I think that somewhere along the line, we decided that the more senior you get, the more stuffy you get, and that you're not meant to have a laugh and a joke. But that's just boring, isn't it? And we spend a huge amount of our time at work. I don't know about you, but I want to muck around every now and again.
Okay, well, finishing on a high note with a bit of humor and a bit of laughter, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I definitely wish you all the best for the next few weeks and finding some new employment in the direction that you prefer, be it still in Australia if that's your preference, or be it back in the UK if need be. From an Australian perspective, and I consider myself living here, I consider myself to be on the Australian side of things. I would very much enjoy to keep having you here in the industry and keep playing an important role to help minorities and especially women in the industry to find their voice, find their strengths, and contribute consciously and also recognize themselves for the contribution that they can make. So thanks for your time. Great. And for all the listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Lisa. And as usual, if you like it, check out some of the other episodes as well and consider subscribing and telling your friends about it. And until next time, keep it simple and bye for now.
Hi, it's Doc Frank again, real quick before you head off. If you are a fan of communications-based train control, or short CBTC, there's an event coming up in September that you absolutely don't want to miss. It's the first virtual global CBTC conference. It's called CBTC World Summit 2023, and it's happening on the 20th and the 21st of September. There will be 3 sessions of about 6 hours duration each for 3 different global regions, one for Asia Pacific, one's for North and South America, and one's for Europe and the Middle East. So wherever you are in the world, one of those sessions will be during the daytime in your time zone, and you can watch it live for the full 6 hours with 6 presentations. The kicker about this is that all other presentations, including the ones from your own session, will be available for replay via recordings. So that means that if the other session should be in the middle of your night, you can still watch it on demand at a time that's more convenient for you and doesn't interfere with your good night's sleep. The conference is available for registration right now at my training portal under docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/summit23. I'm putting a lot of effort into this conference. It will be an absolute blockbuster event, and I very much hope to see you there. Until then, keep it simple and bye for now. Hey, Doc Frank here, host of the Rebel Conversations podcast. Thank you for listening.